This lesson is about trigonometry. You're going to learn how to calculate one side based off the other two. You're going to learn how to calculate an angle based off of two sides, and a side based off a side and an angle. Okay, and all this is for right triangles. So this lesson is the triangle lesson. All right, first, calculate one side from the other two. If you know two out of the three sides of a right triangle, you're going to use Pythagorean theorem to find the third. Okay, Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Now for this equation, doesn't matter which one's a, doesn't matter which one's b. As long as you make c your hypotenuse, or your longest side. It's also the side opposite the 90-degree part of the triangle. Okay, so let's do a couple of examples. All right, I have two sides here. I have this one, and I have this one. So if my equation is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, if the only side that really matters which one's which is c, start with that one. C is our hypotenuse. That would be the 20. We have that one. So we're going to plug in 20 squared for c. And that equals a squared plus b squared. Now it doesn't matter which one's a, which one's b, so I'm just going to make b 10, and we can solve for a. All right, simplify it down. A squared plus 100, which is 10 squared, equals 400, okay, which is 20 squared. Subtract 100, and you get a squared equals 300. Now, we're not done yet, because it's not a squared we're looking for, it's a. So we have to take the square root of 300, and we get a is equal to 17.32. Okay? Other side of the two triangles, or the other one. I have two sides. Okay? So if I take my equation, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. C is this side right here. That's the side I don't know. So that's going to be my question mark. Now it doesn't matter which one I label which for the other two, because we're just going to square them and add them. So it makes no difference between the two. So I'm just going to make 5a, so we have 5 squared plus 14 squared equals. Okay, so 5 squared plus 14 squared equals 221. Okay, and that's c squared. We take the square root, and we get c is equal to 14.866. Okay, now sometimes you won't be just given a picture, sometimes you're going to have to draw it. So here's an example. To get from point A to point B, you must walk through a pond. Okay, so we have a nice pretty pond. To avoid the pond, you must walk 34 meters south. So if I start here, I walk 34 meters south and 41 meters east. Okay, how many meters would be saved if it were possible to walk through the pond? So in order to answer this question, we must calculate this side. So that would be the c side of the triangle. So we would have 34 squared, which is a squared, plus b squared, 41 squared, equals c squared. And we'd solve for c. So you'd have 34 squared plus 41 squared, and then you would have to take the square root of that. And you should get c is equal to 53.26. Okay, give it a try, see if you can't do that on your own. All right, part 2, how to calculate an angle. How do I find the angle if I know two of the sides? Okay, it doesn't matter which two sides I know. As long as I know two sides, I can always find the other side and also the angle. You're going to use sine, cosine, or tangent. Okay, which one you use is going to depend on which sides you have. So we have three equations down here. So if I have side A and C, I'm going to use sine. If I have side B and C, I'm going to use cosine. And A and B, I'm going to use tangent. Now for this one, it doesn't matter which one's A and which one's B. It does matter. Okay? But most of you guys have heard this, and I like this one a little bit better. This is what they give you in the reference table. But I find this one often more helpful. SOHCAHTOA. Okay? Ouch, I hurt my foot. Well, go SOHCAHTOA. Okay? So, sine is used when you have the opposite and the hypotenuse side. Cosine is used when you have the adjacent and the hypotenuse side. And tan is used when you have the opposite and the adjacent side. Now, when I say opposite and adjacent, I mean if I take the angle, A is opposite the angle, B is adjacent. Okay, in this case, B is touching the angle. So cosine uses B divided by C. Okay, adjacent is the one touching the angle. Okay, so I'm going to cover this one before I cover this one. I want you to get your calculator into degrees. Okay, now you may already be in degrees. If you type sine of 30 into your calculator, so in your calculator, you're going to hit the sine button. That's this one right here. And then 3, 0, equals. You should get 0.5 if you're in degrees. If you do not get 0.5, if you get like negative 0.9, something, 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 that means that you are in radians. Most likely, that means that at some point in the recent future, you've done something with a calc person. Okay, sorry, calc people, you're going to have to go back and forth between them. Physics, we deal with degrees. If you got 0.5, you're good to go, and you can ignore this part. Others, you're going to have to hit mode. Use your arrows to go down about 2 to 3 rows. It'll say radians and degrees. You're going to want to go over to degrees and hit the enter button. You can then hit clear, all right, and try this sine of 30 again. It should come out to be 0.5, okay? In physics, we always deal with degrees. Now, this thing right here says take the inverse sine or cosine of the ratio. When I say inverse sine, cosine, tangent, that's this number right here above. So inverse sine is above sine, inverse cosine is above cosine, inverse tangent is above tangent. So you would hit the second button and then the sine button to get inverse sine. And same for cosine and tangent. All right, I'll show you when to use that in just a second. All right, how to calculate an angle. All right, so if I look right here at my first triangle, I have this side and this side, and I care about this angle, okay? My hypotenuse is this side. So if I write SOHCAHTOA up here, it'll be helpful. Hypotenuse. That means I'm either dealing with sine or cosine, okay? My other side is adjacent to my angle. It's touching it, which means that I'm going to be using cosine because I have hypotenuse and adjacent. So the equation is cosine of theta is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. Okay, now they use B over C in the equation. That's the same thing. Okay, in that case, B is the adjacent side and C is the hypotenuse. So cosine of theta is equal to 24 over 36. Now for sine and cosine, it should always be less than 1 because your hypotenuse is your longest side and it's on the bottom. So if you end up with a number greater than 1, chances are you're upside down. All right, so 24 divided by 36 is equal to 0.6666. Okay? So I'm going to round it to 0.6667. Okay, that's cosine of my angle. That's not my angle. And this is where that inverse sine, inverse, cosine comes into play, because you want to get rid of the cosine. You want it to go bye-bye. So what you do is you take the inverse cosine. Okay? So basically, you're going to take the inverse cosine of both these sides. That gets rid of the cosine. It cancels it out. So you end up with your angle is equal to the inverse cosine of 0.6666, rounded is 0.6667. Okay? Now, putting it in your calculator, you would do, and let me erase this. Okay? You're going to hit second cosine. That should give you the inverse cosine button. And then you're going to go in and hit 0.6667. Enter. Okay? And that should give you, let's see, inverse cosine should give you about 48. So your angle is about 48 degrees. Okay? Now, I'm going to do this next one down here because this triangle looks a little weird. Okay? I have this side and this side. Okay? This is my 90 degrees, which means this is my hypotenuse. So hypotenuse is the side I don't have. Now, if you don't have the hypotenuse, it's easy to pick which one you're going to use. You're going to use tangent because that's the only one without it. So tan of theta is TOA, so it's opposite divided by adjacent. Okay, so tan of my angle is equal to opposite. So I looked at which side is opposite the angle, and that would be the 10, divided by adjacent, the one touching the angle, is 33. So I get 10 divided by 33. So tan of theta is equal to 0.303. All right, so to find my angle, I take the inverse tan of that because we want to get rid of that tan. So if you take the inverse tan of that, of 0.303, you get that your angle is equal to 16.86 degrees. Okay? I'm not going to do 22 and 24. You can give them a try if you'd like, just for some practice. Okay, so the trick is get down what tan or sine or cosine of the angle is equal to, then get rid of that sine, cosine, tangent. Take the inverse of it. Okay? The inverse gets rid of things. That's why they're the same button in your calculator. The bottom one puts it into cosine, the top one takes it out of cosine. Now, speaking of putting it into cosine or sine or tangent, we're going to have to do that when we're calculating one side from the angle. Okay? We have the same three equations. Okay? So we're still going to be using SOHCAHTOA. But instead of solving for the angle, we now have the angle. So we're going to be missing something else. Okay? And we're going to use sine, cosine, or tangent based off of what we have. So, if I look at this one that's on the top left, number 15, I have the hypotenuse, okay, and I want the side that's touching the angle that I have. So I want the adjacent side, okay? Now you think, so, nope, that's the opposite side. Oh, that's adjacent. So we're going to be using cosine. Now, cosine of my angle, cosine theta, is cosine of 27, is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse, x over 20. Okay, so we take the inverse cosine to take it out of cosine, or we want to put it into cosine. We have the angle, we want to put it in. So we're going to do cosine of 27. Actually type cosine 27, enter into your calculator. And you're going to get 0.891 is equal to x over 20. Here, we cross multiply, and we get x is equal to 0.891 times 20. X is equal to 17.82. Okay? So my side here is 17.82. Now, we've seen cosine twice. We've seen tangent. I'm going to give us a sine. Let's see. All right. So this last one here. A person is flying a kite and has released 176 meters of string. So I have a kite with 176 meters of string. The string makes an angle of 27 degrees with the ground. How high is the kite? Okay, so if this is the ground, how high the kite is over here. Okay? So if my angle is here and I want the height, I'm looking for the opposite side. Okay, so I know I'm either using sine or tangent. My other side is 176, and that's the hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm using opposite and hypotenuse. That's SOH. S-O-H. So sine of my angle, sine of 27, is equal to opposite, which I'm calculating, and I think I'll just call it x. Okay, equals x over 176. Okay, so sine of 27 is equal to 0.45399, so I'm going to call it 0.454. Is equal to x over 176. Cross multiply. So we're going to multiply that number by 176, and we get 79.9 is equal to x. So that's how high it is. Okay, so there's a nice practical use. If you go flying a kite and you want to know how high it is, figure out how long your string is and what the angle is from the ground. It's a nice way to do it. All right, so that's it for the lesson. Hopefully you learned how to calculate one side from the other two, the angle from two sides, and a side from an angle and a side. So hopefully you got a little bit more comfortable with sine, cosine, and tangent. All right, that's it for the lesson. Good luck.